They cut down my trees, so I cut off their only road. Yeah, that's not a metaphor. That's not some dramatic exaggeration. I mean that literally. Chainsaw for chainsaw, access for access. And the crazy part is, it all started on a completely normal Tuesday, like the kind of day you forget even happened until something snaps it in half. I was at work, halfway through a boring meeting, pretending to care about quarterly numbers, when my phone started buzzing across the desk. I ignored it once, twice. Third time I glanced down and saw my sister's name, and something about that, just the frequency, the persistence, made my stomach tighten. I stepped out to take it, and the moment I heard her voice, shaky, uneven, like she'd just seen something she couldn't unsee, I knew whatever she was about to say wasn't small. She goes, "You need to come home. Right now." No explanation, no build-up, just that. So I left. Didn't even bother with excuses, just grabbed my keys and drove faster than I should have. Mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Fire, break-in, accident, but nothing I imagined came close to what I actually saw when I pulled onto my street. Because the first thing that hit me wasn't what was there, it was what wasn't. That whole eastern edge of my property, the part that used to be lined with 6 massive oak trees, was just empty. Gone. Like someone had taken a giant eraser to the landscape. 40 years those trees had been there. Older than me, older than most of the houses around. Thick trunks, wide canopies, the kind of trees that don't just grow, they anchor a place. And now, clean-cut stumps, like surgical removals, not random damage, not storm debris. This was planned, organized, executed. I parked, got out, and just stood there for a second trying to process it, like my brain needed a minute to catch up with my eyes. The ground was littered with sawdust and tire tracks, branches already hauled off. Like whoever did this didn't just cut the trees, they erased the evidence as fast as they could. And then I saw it. A business card tucked under my windshield wiper. That detail, that little casual, "We were here" signature, it almost made it worse. I pulled it out, read the name, some local tree service company, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe there's been some insane mix-up, maybe someone got the wrong address, because I sure as hell didn't hire anyone. So I called the number right there, standing in what used to be shade. Guy picks up on the second ring, sounds normal, casual, like he's answering just another job call, and I ask him straight up, "Why were you cutting trees on my property?" And there's this pause, not confusion, not surprise, more like recalculating. Then he says, "We had a work order from the HOA. And I go, "What HOA?" He says the name of this gated community up the hill, the one with the big houses and the bigger attitudes, and I just laugh, like actually laugh, because I'm not part of that community, never have been. So I tell him, "Yeah, I don't live there." And this time the pause is different, longer. He goes quiet for a second, then says, "You're not?" "No," I say. "I'm definitely not." And now you can hear it in his voice, that shift from confident to "Oh no, we messed up." He mumbles something about calling me back, hangs up, and suddenly I'm standing there realizing this wasn't a mistake like someone misreading an address. This was someone deciding those trees didn't matter, that they could just remove them. So I start walking the property line, trying to piece it together, and that's when it clicks. My land sits just downhill from that gated community. Let's call it Ridgeview Estates. Brand new development. Went up maybe 5 years ago. All glass railings and oversized windows. The kind of place where people don't just buy houses, they buy views. And those views? They look straight out over the valley. Or at least they're supposed to. Except my trees, those big, beautiful oaks, sat right in the line of sight. Not completely blocking it, but enough to interrupt that perfect postcard panorama. And now they didn't. So yeah, I didn't need anyone to explain the motivation. Someone up there decided their view was worth more than my property. Simple as that. I didn't waste time. I drove straight up to the gate of Ridgeview Estates, hit the call button, and waited. Security answers, polite but guarded, and I tell them I need to speak to whoever authorized cutting down trees on my land. There's a pause, then the usual, "We'll pass along your message" response, which basically translates to "We're not letting you in, but we'll pretend to care." Fine. I go home, wait. About 2 hours later, my phone rings. Unknown number. I pick up, and this guy introduces himself as Daniel Mercer, the HOA president. Voice smooth, practiced, the kind of tone that says he's used to being the one in control of conversations. He doesn't ask what happened. He already knows. Instead, He jumped straight into damage control. Says, we believe those trees were on common land. Believed. That word, it does a lot of heavy lifting, doesn't it? Then he adds, we're willing to reimburse you for the removal costs. And I had to pause for a second because the audacity of that statement almost impressed me. So I say, you mean the cost to replace 6 40-year-old oak trees? Silence. Not long, but long enough. Then he pivots, like they always do. We can discuss reasonable compensation. Reasonable. Another one of those words. Flexible. Convenient. And that's when something shifted for me. Up until that moment, I was angry. Yeah, but it was still reactive anger, like I was trying to figure out what to do next. But hearing him talk like that, like this was just a negotiation, like they could assign a dollar value and move on, it flipped a switch. Because suddenly this wasn't about trees anymore. It was about boundaries, respect, ownership. So I said, you know what, Daniel, before we talk about compensation, there's something you should probably understand. And I almost told him right then. Almost. But I didn't. Because in that split second, I realized something he clearly hadn't. Something about that community, about the way it was built, about the one thing they all relied on every single day without thinking twice. And the moment I saw it, the whole situation changed. So instead, I kept my voice calm, thanked him for his time, said we'd talk soon, and I hung up. Now here's the thing about Ridgeview Estates. They're gated. One entrance, one exit. That's it. No back roads, no alternate routes, no secret side access. Just a single paved road that winds down the hill and connects to the main street. And that road? Yeah, it runs right through my property. I didn't figure that out that day. I already knew it. What I didn't know, what they clearly didn't think about, was the legal side of it. Because about 20 years ago, when the land was first being developed, the original owner of my property made a handshake deal with the developer. A verbal agreement. Sure, you can run a road through here. No paperwork, no official easement filed, just trust. Old school. And when I bought the land from his estate, that handshake didn't transfer, which means, technically, legally, that road had no right to be there. And they'd been using it anyway, every single day, for 5 years. So yeah, I didn't tell Daniel any of that on the phone, because some information you don't give away for free. Some things you save. And as I stood there looking at those stumps, where my trees used to be, I realized something real simple. If they thought they could take something from me without asking, then maybe it was time I showed them what that actually feels like. All right, let me pause the story for a second, because this is where things get interesting, not just emotionally, but legally and psychologically too. And if you don't understand this part, the rest of what I did is going to sound crazy, when in reality, it was calculated. According to standard procedure, any homeowners association, HOA, whatever you want to call it, doesn't actually have authority outside of its own governed boundaries. That means if you're not part of that community, they don't get to make decisions about your land, your trees, your anything. Period. Now, could this have been an honest mistake? Maybe. But here's where it gets tricky. From a legal perspective, cutting down someone else's trees without verified property lines isn't just a mistake. It can qualify as property damage, even trespassing, sometimes worse depending on intent and value. And mature trees? Those aren't cheap. We're talking serious liability. Now psychologically, this is where it gets even more predictable. This is a psychological trap. When people are used to control, especially in structured environments like gated communities, they start assuming authority extends beyond its actual limits. It's subtle, but dangerous. They stop asking, start deciding. They don't think they're stealing, they think they're fixing a problem. Their problem. And that mindset. That's exactly what got them into this situation. So yeah, once I understood exactly where I stood, legally, strategically, I stopped reacting and started planning. And there's a big difference between those two. Reaction is loud, messy, emotional. Planning is quiet, deliberate, patient. And I knew if I was going to do this, I couldn't half-step it. No bluffing, no threats, just action. Next morning, first call I made wasn't to a lawyer, wasn't to the HOA, wasn't to that guy Daniel. It was to a surveyor. Because before you do anything involving land, you make sure you know exactly where that land begins and ends. No guesswork, no assumptions. By noon, he was out there with his equipment, measuring, marking, confirming what I already suspected but needed in writing. Every boundary line, Every corner, every inch accounted for. And when he was done, he looked at me and said, "Yeah, that road cuts right through your property. About 15 feet in at its widest point. 15 feet. That's not a gray area. That's not, maybe it overlaps a little. That's clear. Clean. Undeniable." So I thanked him, paid him, and moved on to step 2. By that afternoon, I had contractors lined up. Not some temporary barrier, not cones or tape. I'm talking a full, solid installation. Steel posts, chain link fencing, 8 feet tall, reinforced gate, heavy lock. The kind of setup that says this isn't a suggestion, this is a boundary. And I made sure it was placed exactly where it needed to be, right across that access road, perfectly aligned with the surveyed property line. No encroachment on their side, no overreach on mine. Just precise, legal placement. Now here's the part people always ask me about. Did you warn them? No. And I'll tell you why. Because warning them would have given them time to react, to scramble, to try and stop it before it happened. They had their chance to communicate before they cut down my trees. They didn't take it. So I wasn't about to extend them a courtesy they never gave me. By Tuesday, the fence was up. Clean job, quick work. If you drove up that hill expecting to glide right into your gated paradise, you'd hit steel instead. Gate locked. No way through. Wednesday morning chaos. Absolute chaos. My phone started blowing up before I even finished my coffee. Calls, texts, unknown numbers, voicemail after voicemail stacking up like a backlog of panic. And then, right on cue, Daniel. He called once. I didn't answer. Called again. Ignored. By the 6th call, I figured, all right, let's hear it. So I pick up, and he doesn't even bother with pleasantries this time. No smooth tone, no corporate calm, just straight into it. You need to remove that fence immediately. Not, can we talk? Not, what's going on? Just a command. And I almost smiled when I heard it, because that told me everything I needed to know. He still thought he was in control. So I said, "Good morning to you too." He exhales, frustrated. "You can't block that road. People can't get to their homes." And I go, "Sounds inconvenient. That line right there. Yeah, that hit a nerve. You're causing a serious issue here," he says, voice tightening. "This is illegal." And that's when I dropped it. Calm, simple, no emotion. Actually, it's not. There's no recorded easement. You might want to check with your lawyer. Silence. Not the confused kind from before. This was heavier. Like something just clicked on his end, and he didn't like what it showed him. Because here's the thing. Once you say check with your lawyer, people either double down or they pause. And Daniel? He paused. He muttered something about calling me back, hung up, and for the first time since this started, I knew the balance had shifted. Now while he was off doing damage control, I just went about my day. Took a walk around the property, looked at those stumps again. Not gonna lie, that still stung. But it also reminded me why I was doing this. This wasn't petty. This wasn't revenge for the sake of ego. This was correction. They crossed a line, literally, and now they were learning where that line actually was. By that afternoon, I started hearing from other people. Residents. Not Daniel. Not the HOA board, actual homeowners. And the tone there? Completely different. Confused. Frustrated. Some of them had no idea what even happened. They just knew they couldn't get in or out without taking some ridiculous detour miles around through back roads that weren't meant for daily traffic. And that's when it really hit, the ripple effect. See, when the HOA made that decision to cut my trees, they probably thought it was contained. A small issue. One property owner, one complaint, one check written and done. But what they didn't account for was how dependent their entire community was on something they didn't legally own. That road wasn't just a convenience. It was a lifeline. Work commutes, school runs, deliveries, emergency access. All of it flowed through that single strip of land they assumed was theirs to use. And now, it wasn't. Friday morning, Daniel called again. And this time, different voice. Slower. Controlled, but not in that confident way from before. More like someone choosing their words carefully because they know they don't have leverage anymore. "Hey," he says, "I think we need to find a way to resolve this." There it is. No more demands. No more accusations. Now it's resolve. So I let him talk. He starts with the trees. Says they're willing to replace all 6. Not saplings, not cheap fixes. He specifically says mature oaks, professionally planted. Which, by the way, tells me he did his homework after our last call, because those aren't cheap. That's a serious investment. I don't say anything. Just let the silence sit there. Then he adds, we'll also provide a formal written apology from the HOA. Still nothing from me. Silence is powerful. People rush to fill it. So he keeps going. And we're prepared to offer compensation for the inconvenience. I finally speak. How much? He hesitates, just a fraction of a second, and then says 10,000. And I gotta be honest, a week ago, that number might have sounded big. Might have felt like something. But standing there, knowing what I knew now, it didn't even move the needle. So I said, try again. No anger, no attitude, just flat. That probably threw him off more than if I'd yelled. There's another pause. Longer this time. I can almost picture him, hand over the phone, talking to someone else in the room, recalculating again. Because now it's not just about money, it's about access. Every hour that fence stays up, their problem gets bigger. Pressure builds. Complaints stack. And I'm not the one feeling it. When he comes back, the offer changes. Not just numbers, structure. He says they're willing to formalize an easement agreement. Official, recorded, legal. Which means from that point on, they'd actually have the right to use that road. But here's the key. It wouldn't be free anymore. He says, we can include a monthly access fee. Now we're talking. I lean back, take a breath, let the moment stretch just a little, because this is where you don't rush. This is where you let them meet you where you are. So what are you thinking? I ask, and he gives me the number. 2,000 a month. Paid directly to me. Plus full replacement of the trees. Plus the written apology. Plus covering all legal and installation costs. And just like that, the dynamic flipped completely. A few days ago, they were cutting down my trees without even asking. Now they were negotiating for permission to use my land. I didn't answer right away. Didn't jump at it. Because this wasn't just about getting something back. It was about setting a precedent. Making sure this kind of thing didn't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone else they thought they could push around. So I asked a few more questions. Clarified terms. Made sure everything would be documented properly. No more handshake deals. No more assumptions. Everything in writing. Everything enforceable. And when I was satisfied, I said yes. We signed the agreement the following week. Lawyers involved. Paperwork filed, everything official. The fence came down, but not before that contract was locked in tight. And a few months later, those trees? Yeah, they came back. Not the same ones. Obviously, you don't replace 40 years overnight, but close enough. Big, healthy oaks, professionally planted, guaranteed to take root and grow. It'll take time, sure, but then again, some things are worth waiting for. And every month after that, $2,000. Like clockwork. All because someone thought they could take something that wasn't theirs and get away with it. Turns out, they couldn't. So yeah, that's how it ended. Trees gone, then replaced. Road blocked, then legalized. Monthly checks showing up like clockwork, and on paper, it looks like a clean win, right? Like one of those stories where the little guy stands his ground, outplays the system, and walks away with justice, and a little extra on top. But if you zoom out for a second, if you really sit with it, there's more going on here than just a satisfying ending. Because situations like this, they don't come out of nowhere. They build. Quietly. Slowly. Through assumptions, through shortcuts, through people getting a little too comfortable with power they were never officially given. The lesson here is, ownership isn't just about what's yours, it's about what you're willing to defend. And I don't mean aggressively, I don't mean emotionally. I mean clearly, deliberately. Because the moment you let something slide, just once, just this time, you're teaching people how to treat you. And most of the time, they won't even realize they're crossing a line. Because from their perspective, that line stopped existing the moment nobody enforced it. And that's exactly what happened here. That road had been used for years without issue. No one questioned it. No one double-checked the paperwork. It just became normal. And normal is dangerous, because normal doesn't get examined. It gets assumed. From a legal perspective, this whole situation could have gone very differently if that easement had been properly recorded from the start. One document, one filing. That's all it would have taken to make everything they were doing completely legitimate. But they didn't do it. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't think it mattered. Maybe they trusted a handshake more than a contract. And that's the thing. Good intentions don't hold up in legal disputes. Documentation does. Always. And on the flip side, I got lucky too. Because if I hadn't known about that missing easement, if I hadn't taken the time to verify it before acting, I could have made a very expensive mistake. Blocking access to a legally protected road? That's not a power move. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So this wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about doing it the right way. Now, psychologically, this is the part that sticks with me the most. Because what happened here wasn't some evil mastermind plan. It wasn't villains sitting around a table plotting how to ruin my day. It was something way more common, and honestly, way more dangerous. This is a psychological trap. When people operate inside systems that give them authority, structure, rules, they start to internalize that authority as absolute. Especially in places like HOAS, where everything is regulated, everything has guidelines, people get used to being able to make decisions, enforce standards, control outcomes. And over time, that control starts to bleed outward. They stop asking, "Do we have the right to do this?" and start asking, "Why haven't we done this yet?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because now you're not checking boundaries, you're assuming them, expanding them. And when nobody pushes back, that expansion keeps going. Until one day, it hits something solid. And that's what I was. Not because I'm special, not because I was looking for a fight, but because I happened to be in a position where I could say no and back it up. Legally, practically, undeniably. But here's the part one think a lot of people miss. This wasn't about revenge. It might sound like it, I get that. They cut my trees, so I cut their road. It has that poetic symmetry, that cinematic payoff. But if revenge had been the goal, I could have handled it very differently. Faster, louder, messier. What this actually was leverage. They created a problem for me without asking. I identified a problem for them that they couldn't ignore. And instead of escalating endlessly, instead of dragging it through courts for months or years, I used that leverage to bring things back into balance. Trees replaced. Access legalized. Compensation agreed. That's not destruction. That's negotiation, just with higher stakes. And yeah, there's a part of me that still feels that sting when I think about those original trees. You don't just replace 40 years of growth with a contract and a couple of trucks full of soil. That loss is real. But at the same time, there's also something grounding about knowing where you stand now. No gray areas. No assumptions. Just clear lines, clearly respected. So if you take anything from this, whether you own land, live in an HOA, or just deal with people who like to push boundaries, the lesson here is simple, but not easy. Know what's yours. Verify it. And if someone crosses that line, don't rush, don't react blindly. Pause, understand the system, and respond in a way that actually holds up. Because in the end, the strongest position you can be in isn't the loudest one. It's the one that's right. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in this situation? Would you have taken the money and moved on, or gone further? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know, these things can get complicated fast. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And yeah, if you enjoy stories where things don't go exactly the way people expect, you know what to do.